So welcome back everyone in our space shooter series. In the previous part of the series, we have accomplished a lot of things. We have created the moving background, developed a player character with shooting abilities, and implemented enemy shooting mechanics. In this exciting finale, we will introduce a spawning system for the enemy, implement the damage mechanics for the player and enemy, and create a user interface to display vital information like health and score. Now before starting the video, if you are following this series, then you may have already downloaded the project from my GitHub. Now I want you to download it again because I have added comment in all the script and there are some important changes in the UI as well. So just click on this green code button and download it again. So for the spawning system, we first need to set some point from where our enemy could spawn. And for the points, I'm gonna select the main scene and then add 2 control node under it. Now one control node is going to be for the left side and other one is going to be for the right side. So click any one of them and in the anchors, set one of them to top right. Then I'm going to name it right spawn position. And for the other one, it's going to be the left spawn position. Now just select the left spawn position and then you need to drag it, and after dragging, you just hold shift key and now you can only move it in one axis. And keep an eye on the bottom left corner, you will see the exact coordinate you are moving. All you need to do is move 100 pixels above. After that, select the right spawn position and we are going to do the same thing. We will move it and then hold the shift key, and while looking at the bottom left, we will move it 100 pixels above. And there we have 2 positions from where our enemy could spawn. Now after that, select the main scene and click on this icon to add a script. And select where you want to store the file. I'm going to select the code and hit open and hit create. Now delete everything that is pre-generated. And the first thing we're going to do is create an enemy variable that will store our enemy scene. And for the loading, I'm using the preload function and provided the path where the scene is actually stored. After that, we will create a ready function and inside it, we will start the timer for 2 seconds. This will be the starting delay for spawning the enemies when we run the game. Now, in order to use this timer functionality, we first need to add a timer node under the scene. So just click on the main scene and then add one timer node under it. Now, while selecting the timer, go in the node tab, and here out of all of these signals, we want to connect the timeout signal to the script. So just double click and hit connect. Now inside it, the first thing we're gonna do is create an instance of the enemy. After that, we will add the child under the root node, and since the script is attached to the root node, we can just simply write add child. And after this, we have to set the position of the enemy. Now for setting the position, we actually have 2 options. We can either set it under the right spawn position or we can set it under the left spawn position. So for this, we first generate a random number that can be either 0 or 1. Next, we see if the number is 1, then we set the enemy position to our left spawning position. Similarly, when we don't get 1, we will set the enemy position to our right spawning position. And after all of this, we will start the timer again for a random duration between 0 to 3 seconds. And that's pretty much all you need to do. You can just run the game. And as you can see, our enemies are spawning from both left and right direction. But yes, you can see a problem that our enemies are colliding with each other. So let's just quickly fix it. Now Godot has already provided a beautiful way to handle this situation, and that's called layers and mask. So first go into the enemy scene, and in the inspector you will see a collision section. Now inside it, we have layers and mask. Now you can imagine layers as a sheet of paper stacked at top of each other, and each sheet has a number 1, 2, 3 and so on. And now any object that need to collide with something will be on any one of these layers. And as for enemy, it is right now on the layer number 1. And if I just go to the player scene, and in the collision, you can say that our player is also on the layer number 1. In other words, we can say our player and our enemy are both on the same sheet of paper. Now you can see in the mask, layer 1 is selected. This means our player can collide with any of the bodies which are present on layer number 1. And since right now our enemies are also on the layer number 1, that's why our player is able to collide with the enemies. So what we usually do is put our enemy and player on different layers. So right now I will say layer number 1 is for enemy and layer number 2 is for player. Now player needs to collide with the enemy. So in the mask, I will uncheck the layer number 1 and select the layer number 2 because layer number 2 is for enemy. Similarly, in the enemy scene, I will set the enemy in the layer number 2, and for the mask, it will be layer number 1 because our enemy need to collide with the player, but it should not collide with other enemies. And that's it. You can just run the game and you will notice our enemies are no longer colliding with each other. Till now we have added our enemy and player into the game and both of them are able to shoot. But if the player bullet hit the enemy, the game will break at this line because we haven't created the take damage function inside the enemy script. And similarly, if we get hit by the enemy bullet, the game also gonna break at this line because we haven't created the take damage function in the player script. So to solve this, all we need to do is create this function. So go into the enemy script, and the first thing we're going to do is create a variable health and set it to 5. Now come all the way to the down, and here we will create our take damage function. Now the first thing we're going to do in the damage function is reduce our health by 1. After that, we will check if the health is equal to 0, which means the enemy has died and it is time to remove it. So we just need to write Q free to delete it. Now we are going to do the exact same thing on the player script as well. So just go into the player scene, and at the top, we first create a health variable and set it to 5. Then at the bottom, we first reduce our health, and then when our health equals to 0, we will delete the player. And that's it. You can just run the game, and you will notice when we are able to hit the enemy 5 times, it will disappear. And the same goes for our player. If the enemy managed to hit 5 times, then we will just get deleted. Now there's one more way I like the player to die, and that's when you fail to kill the enemy and it managed to touch you. Then you instantly die regardless of how many health you have. It will be a one move knockout. So to implement that, we first need to go into the player scene, and here we first need to add one area 2D node followed by a collision shape. Now in the collision shape, we're gonna set its shape to capsule. Now under the transform, I'm gonna rotate it 90 degrees and then use this handle to expand the collision shape and make sure it covers the entire sprite. Now click on Area 2D, and in the Node tab, here we want to connect the body interrupt signal. So just double click it and connect to the player. Now inside it, we want to make sure that the thing we hit is the enemy. And if you think that you could just check it from body.name and then look it for enemy, then it will not work. Because when you play the game, you can actually switch to remote tab, and as you can see, there are multiple enemies, and when they are added to the game, their name is like enemies at the rate 1, 2, 3 and so on. So to detect the enemy in this case, we will put all the enemy inside a single group. So go into the enemy scene, and here in the node tab, right beside the signal, you will find a group option, and here you just need to provide a name for the group. I will write enemy and hit add. Now as you can see, there is a small cube box which says this node is in a group called enemy. Now we can just go to the player script. Now instead of checking for body.name, we will check if the body is in the group of enemy, and if it is, then we indeed collided with an enemy. Now in that case, we will set our health to 1 and then call the take damage function. We are setting the health to 1 because inside the take damage function, we are again reducing it. So when the take damage function will run, it will become 0, and then we will delete our player. Alright, so we are now in the finale of this space shooter series, finally creating the UI. So in the UI, all we wanted is to show the health and score of the player, and also we wanted to create a restart scene when the player dies. Now if you haven't downloaded the updated project, then do it now, because in the images folder, I have added one more image, which is the pause button. Alright, so as you know, the UI always stays at top of everything, and that's the reason we are going to add one canvas layer node, because canvas layer stay at top of everything. Now under it, we first going to create our pause button. So for that, I'm gonna use a texture button, and I'm gonna rename to pause button. Then in the inspector, you will find a texture property. Here we need to set this pause button image in the normal and in the pressed and also in the hover. You can leave these three empty. Right now it doesn't matter. After that, select the canvas layer node, and under it we will add two label nodes, one for the score and other one for the health. So I'm just gonna rename it to score and this one to life. Then select the score node, and here in the inspector I will just gonna write score 0. This is just for a reference. We will eventually change it through code. Now below it there is a label setting. So just create a new label setting, and under it set the font to 27. And for the color, I'm gonna set orange color. Now I will also copy this code because we are going to set the same color in the life one as well. So just click on the life node, and here I will write live 5, and then we're going to do the same thing. Create a new label setting. Under it, set the font to 27. And for the color, I'm gonna just paste the code, and here we have it. Now you can just drag this and arrange it like this. And you can even zoom it to arrange it more precisely. And does look great. Now the next thing we wanted is to create a background when we press this pause button. So for that, go into the canvas layer and add one color rect node. Now in the anchors, set it to full rect so that it covers the entire screen. And for the color, I'm just going to set it to black and reduce its transparency to about 90. Now I'm just gonna name it to background, and under it, I'm gonna add one label node and 3 button node. These are not any texture button, they are just simple plain button. Now here we have these 4 nodes which we want to anchor it to the center of the screen. So one way is to select each node at a time and then go into the anchors and set it to center, and then repeat the same process for each and every node. But there is a faster way of doing this. All you need to do is select all of these nodes and then go to the anchor and set it to center. Now this anchor is applied to all of these nodes, and all of these are centered. Now select the label node, and in the text I will write game over. Then in the label setting, we're gonna set the font to 40, and for the color, I'm gonna go for a red color. And now for these buttons, I'm gonna rename it to resume, restart, and exit. Now select the resume node, and in the text, just write resume. For the restart, write restart, and for the exit, write exit. Now all you need to do is arrange these nodes similar to how I am doing. The label is going to be on the top, followed by the resume button, then the restart button, exit button at the last. You should also expand this button because they are pretty small right now, and arrange it to the center. Yeah, like this. Now the main reason behind arranging these nodes like this is that if we go to the label and change the text from game over to paused and change the horizontal alignment to center, so this screen can work as the pause screen. And if we again change the label to game over and hide our resume button, then this scene can be used as a game over screen, where the only option is restarting or exiting the game. Now once we set up all the nodes, it's time to control them from the script. And the first thing we are going to do is update the score and player's life on the screen. So if we talk about the player health, it will update when the enemy bullet hit it. And for that, if you remember, we are dealing with this situation in the player script. So just go into the player script, and this is where we are dealing with the player health. So we need a way to send the value of this health variable to our main scene. And for that, we are going to take the help of signals. So at the top, we are going to create a signal called player hit, and this variable shows that we are going to set some data. Now scroll down to the take damage function, and here after we update our health, we are going to emit the signal and pass the health variable with it. Now come back to the main scene, then go to the player, and in the signal, you will notice our custom made signal is here. So just double click and connect it to the main scene. Now inside this function, we can simply set the text of the life node using the value we got from the signal. Also note that the value contains an integer, so we need to convert it to the string before we can set it to the text. After that, we will check if the value is 1, which means our player died. Then we will first pause the game and then make our background visible. Now as you can see, by default, I have set the label to game over and I have also hide the resume button. So in other words, by default, I am going to use the background for the game over scene. And that's the reason why we only need to make the background visible and change nothing else. And after that, we are going to do the exact same thing in the enemy as well. So go into the enemy script and here we first create the signal. Now unlike the player, we don't want to know the health of enemy. We only want to know when the enemy died. And that's why we are not sending any kind of data with it. Now again, go down to the take damage function. And here, when the enemy died, we will emit the signal before this queue is free statement. Now after that, we are going to connect this enemy died signal to our main script. So go to the main script. And here, first we are going to create a score variable to calculate the score. And after that, we have added our enemy to the game. We will connect the signal we created using the connect method. Now the first argument is the signal name that we have created. And the second one is the function that it will connect to. Now since this function doesn't exist right now, that's why it's getting error. So let's just create this function. So I will come all the way to the down and here I will create this onDied function. Now inside this function, we will first increase our score. And after that, we will set this score in our label node. Now at last, we need to tell what to do when we click on these buttons. So first click on this pause button. And in the signal, we are going to attach the press signal to the script. So just connect it. And I'm going to do the same process for the resume button. Again, connect the press signal and hit connect. For the restart, connect the press signal. And for the exit, connect the press signal. Now when we press the pause button, we are first going to pause the game. And after that, we are going to make our background visible. And since by default, the background is for game over, so that's why we need to set the text to pause and also make the resume button visible again. Now for the resume button, everything is going to be exactly opposite from the pause button. So first we unpause the game and then we will hide the background. We will make the text to game over again and also hide the resume button. Now for the restart button, we will first unpause the game and then reload the current scene. And lastly, for the exit button, we will close the game using the quit function. And that's pretty much it. All you need to do is switch to the 2D tab. And here we will first hide this background. And secondly, when we are pressing this pause button, every single node is going to get paused, which include these 3 buttons. But we want this button to work even when our game is paused. So for that, select the background node. And in the inspector, there is a process function. Now here, set the mode to always. This means that this node is going to work always, no matter our game is paused or not. And since these 3 buttons are under it, these 3 also inherit this property. And that's pretty much it. You just run the game. And when we press this button, our game gets paused. We can resume it. We can even restart the game. And we can exit it. Also, when any of the enemy die, our score gets increased. And when we hit by the enemy bullet, the score also decreases. And when we ran out of life, it will be game over. Now there are some areas where you might face some problem or get some error. And one of them is layer and mask. So for example, for the left wall, you can see in the collision, I have put it in the enemy layers so that it don't collide with the enemy and it only collide with our player. Similarly, for the player bullet, I have put it in the player's layer and it is only going to collide with the enemy. And for the enemy bullet, I have put it in the enemy layer and it can only collide with our player. So if you are facing any kind of problem regarding collision, then you first need to check that your layers and masks are properly updated or not. Now the second place where you might face error is naming the nodes. Because if you just copied my code, then there is a possibility that the names I used here are not matching with the names that you have set in the node. So if you are facing any kind of problem with these lines, then it is most likely that the names written here are not matching with the actual name. and even after checking all of these you are still facing any kind of problem, then write down the comment section and I will try to solve it. So thanks for joining us in this exciting finale of our Space Shooter series. I hope you enjoyed this series and found it informative. Feel free to explore the code and experiment it with additional features and improvement. So once again, thanks for watching and I will see you in the next one.